the Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide.
I've had people walk out on me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn pus-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
So obviously, one of the other stories that came out this week was that Nancy Pelosi was not going to Taiwan until she did. And the back and forth about whether or not she should go and whether it would be World War III and all the like CCP apologists that are on Twitter, who are all the same people who think that Russia should invade Ukraine if they want to, and that Bashar al-Assad is the good guy. All of those folks were saying we're going to provoke China into a war, and this is, this will be the end, and this is the end. And
I just watched the Val Kilmer documentary.
Oh, it's beautiful, and what a sweet guy, and it's heartbreaking, and I love him. And
it's pretty heartbreaking.
It is. We need stem cell technology to make a huge leap forward, so they can rebuild him a throat. So you can grow him a throat,
and then convince Christian scientists that it's okay, because I think that was a lot of his problem.
Right. Well, that was.
It's not a tumor.
Right. Yeah. It's not a tumor. This is the stop it. Stop whining. You lack discipline. So, one of the things that really stands out about the fact that, by the way, the United States, just so you know, we have 20 super carriers, 20 aircraft carriers that are enormous. China has 2, and one of them, and easy, and one of them used to be a casino. So I'm not kidding.
Wait,
you don't know that?
No.
How do you not know that? I know
it used to be a casino.
It used to be a casino. Yeah. So the Soviets gifted them a hold on. I have to bring up the article so I can show it to Johnny Million on the air. But there we go. Russia gave them one of these things, and it got landlocked by Chinese development. They built around it. They built because they mess with the grounds all the time, and it couldn't go anywhere. So they parked it and turned it into a hotel. And then they needed it later to double the size of their effective military. And so they got a bunch of stuff and dug a big trench and then moved it out into the sea. It's a Kiev class carrier, the ironically named Kiev class carrier. And it is, let's see, this is, it's effectively just, it's not a useful ship. It just isn't. The other thing is they don't have enough airplanes to launch that have a short enough, launch distance that can take off on the aircraft carrier that they have. It's too short for the planes that they have. So they have to design a whole new plane in the next 20 years that will take off effectively from the boat, as opposed to the ones that they bought from Russia that they can no longer get parts for because Europe makes the parts. Yeah, exactly. So it's, and there's a lot of dumb in this. Obviously the posturing was crazy. They were, they were beating the war drum, saying if there will be a huge price to pay if she visits. And even, my friends in Chinese, my Chinese friends who live there, who are, not in Taiwan, but in China proper, were like, we don't understand why it's this big a deal. Because they know that there's a separation of powers in our government, that even though Nancy Pelosi is third in line to be president, that's not how it works. It's not like a Pez dispenser the way it is in, the Chinese Communist Party, where they go, okay, the third in line guy, if the second in line guy dies, then they're going to run the place next. Whatever, So if Biden's president forever and he dies at 96, then Nancy Pelosi will take over when she's 104. Like, it's so whatever. Anyways, they act as though it's, we have a similar system, and we frankly do not. She's a member of the House, and she could not be the speaker and not be third in line after this election if the progressives have their way.
Progressives, yes.
Right. Yeah, well, if they were real progressives, they'd want actual progress, and they'd be happy about the progress that we're making, but they aren't, so I call BS. They are our version of evangelical right-wing Christians. Those folks are Christian in name only, don't actually want any of the things that Jesus taught to actually have happen. If he was around, they would consider him insufficiently loyal to Trump and want him crucified all over again. And and no group doesn't have a group of nuts in it that, run interference for the rest of us trying to make the world better. And that would be our group. So one of the other things about this story is that, of course, is that this is a story from Agent France Press, but it's been getting it's pretty self-evident from anybody who's been watching this, that China drills reveal plans for Taiwan blockade. They are gaming out what they would do to take Taiwan, which tells us exactly what they're going to do when they take Taiwan. One of the worst things that you have, in gaming out a war situation, especially with a rogue actor or somebody who seems like they're being, unnecessarily volatile or, petulant about certain things, and you're like, I don't know, like Putin, arguably, like none of the invading Ukraine made no sense. And yet he did it anyways. And so part of what caught everybody off guard was the just absolute ego of it, because everybody was looking at it and going, well, that won't work. So he obviously must be smart enough not to try something that obviously will not work. And he did. And it didn't work, like everybody said so. But that doesn't mean he wouldn't try, and maybe, it's the last thing they would expect me to do. You know what I mean? Well, China, on the other hand, is showing their hand entirely. I mean, they've only got a couple of options, which is blockade the island, fire missiles around it to try and through sonar, find invisible subs floating around the Taiwan Strait, and then ship a bunch of people over to beat everyone in Taiwan to death with the butt of rifles, because they just don't have the personnel to do it. And for the record, without us involved, without the rest of the world involved at all, if China attacked Taiwan, they would lose 1 million soldiers in the first 48 hours, because they would never reach the beach. And if they did, they could only reach from one direction, because they would be pelted like crazy while they did it, because they would be coming from the mainland directly across. And even if the ships that circled it, they couldn't get close enough, because Taiwan actually has, anti-ship batteries that are really, they've been preparing for this for 60 years, for 55 years. Ukraine has not. Ukraine's been under the thumb of Russia until 2014. And they, with Poroshenko, they were kind of just getting on their feet. They're still purging out some of the Russian sock puppets in their system today. Taiwan's been an independent country for all practical purposes. They have their own money, their own government, their own judiciary. They've got a separate passport from the normal Chinese one, and yet supposedly they're part of China. It's absurd. Imagine if China was saying this about the Philippines or South Korea, or even Japan for that matter.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Imagine if China just said, Japan is part of our country already, because look at them. You can't tell, most European white people can't tell the difference between Asian people anyway, so it's ours. We just claim it. Not only would that be psychotically racist, much like it is with their feelings toward the people in Hong Kong, but it's absurd.
Yeah.
It's an absurdity. And It's not going to happen. And if it does happen, it will be a terrible mistake. Just like the zero COVID policy was a terrible mistake, just like this idea that they could stockpile grain for 2 years, 2 years of grain in case they get sanctioned, as if the sanctions on Russia are going to go away ever without a complete change in the government. And if the sanctions on the Russian government are going to hold until almost everybody who's in there is broomed out, or somebody comes in and says, "I'm the new Gorbachev. Sorry about that. Our bad. We're going to help with the rebuild. That guy was a nut. We got rid of him. I'm good. We want to play nice with the rest of the world." Unless that happens, the Russian sanctions are going to stay. And the difference is between Russia and China is that Russia, technically speaking, they have enough arable land and a small enough population and enough access to fuel that they could be an isolated country, impoverished but isolated, kind of like North Korea, for a period of time. It would take them a good 10 years before they would absolutely collapse into chaos. It would happen, and their neighbors would attack them like crazy. The Chechens, the Georgians, everybody who had had enough of their crap, even the Kazakhstanis would take over parts of the country that they wouldn't have the ability to fight back on, but they'd still maintain. And again, China imports 80% of their food, 85% of their fuel, their oil and gas. And that you don't get, if you don't survive sanctions around that stuff, not at that level.
No.
Russia's been a net exporter. China is not. China only exists because it's been playing nice in its current form with its current number of people, because it's been playing nice with the rest of the world. Once it stops, we still give aid to China, even during all this stuff, even while they're threatening to blow up Taiwan with Nancy Pelosi on it, even with, while, what, 60% of their population lives on $401 a year in sustenance. They have a space program. I mean, we talk about a lot in this country about how, why are we trying to go to the moon and why do we have a space station when we have homeless people in the United States? We got in a country about 340 million people, we have rotating about 200,000 relative permanent homeless people, and not, and then other people are like mentally ill and other people who slip off the radar. So about 2.5 million people at the worst that are in like genuine food insecurity, where it's really scary and their health is in danger and that kind of stuff. And we're always rotating out the majority of those people to getting them help or getting them, some sort of shelter in cities across the country. We don't have near the 60-40, financial imbalance that's happening in China right now.
Especially with Tony Macaroni and the North Korean kroner.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's lovely. There you go. And Jerry Cummings, by the way, supports Free Ukraine. Thank you very much. Hal and Johnny, please share what you eat to stay so fit. Oh, well, he runs like crazy. We got to take a break. When we come back, I keep blowing through the first hour break because I'm just having so much fun. We'll be back right at ice cream. Quit it. We'll be back right after this.
So much ice cream.
So much.